I think that's a great point. But while the point is fantastic, I'm sure it also increases the VC's work a bit too much. And considering that the industry is, cannot only be purely economically driven, it has to have a very large, it already has a very large social responsibility inbuilt into it. So what are your challenges as investors to actually fund a company? Where do you find that, your hands are tied, and while the model looks great and everything around it is great, but you still feel that something is holding you back? And particularly, I think education sector becomes, extremely towards it. So where do you then, how do you make a suggestion to the people whom in the education industry, whether they should go for debt or for equity, or maybe, it might be a CSR friendly model rather than being a scalable model in that effect?
So is it me or?
To all the investors.
Okay.
You can start. It's okay. You can start.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess it varies again on the nature of business. I think there are some businesses which are well established, which have been running for a while, where debt is an easier option to actually expand the business. More often than not, I think it's the equity which people seek as growth capital. And I think to mix the two questions which you had of social versus economic benefits, somewhere I think we wear colored hats, frankly, right? I mean, we are very much profit oriented in our thinking, and even though I personally believe this is a social sector, at least some parts of it. So core education in our head is social, especially in the K-12 side, but training and technology and ancillary services can be full for profit. That may be also echoed by the government, because if you look at the regulatory environment, the schools and the colleges are where you have trusts and society structures, not-for-profit, incentives on getting land and things. But same regulations don't exist for, on the publishing side or the technology side, or someone who's running a IIT or a medical training college or whatever have you, right? So I think when I look at my social hat, I think somewhere it really falls off on the non-core sectors. Even in the core, like I said, there's a mixed view. We want to be profit-oriented, but often we have to look at social from a different perspective, which is that, really there's a glass ceiling on fees you can make. Will parents pay beyond a point? Those thoughts cross your mind, and therefore would impact the cash flow you can generate from a business in the core side. I mean, take a school business or a college business. Let's take a school example. In any normal school, it's a 7-year plus payback, more close to 9 years, right? And it's only then when you start making serious money. And whatever you make then is, icing on cake. But for the initial years, it's a tight ship unless you have historical land and capital advantages. So if you set up an institution today, then you could have some differentiator, which means that if you set up a school which is charging, substantially more than the market, then you do become an outlier. And is that model scalable? So I think that scalability then comes into play, because India is not ready for it. India can't afford so many schools which can be charging students so many lakhs a year as fees. So I think the two are mixed up, and each play own part. But in our own head, I think I'm mixed up.
Sure. No, but yeah, you want to add?
Actually, if I clarify that. So the thing is that there's actually a model that helps you understand social non-profit versus for-profit. And it's basic common sense. Ultimately, every entity is a function of cash coming in, cash going out. Let me explain that to you. Cash going out, so let's say if you're a social entity, your cash going out could be like, let's say I'm providing free training to, let's say, slum kids, right? But there's a cost to pay the teacher's salary to train those slum kids. There's a cost to transport these people to teach the slum kids. There's a cost to the textbooks. there's a cost to that. You know the cash is not coming in from the slum kids, so therefore, where's your cash coming in from? Then your cash is coming in from either a donor or a bunch of donors, or maybe your own personal funds. Now, if it's your personal funds, great, then you're not running a business, you're running a hobby, an expensive hobby, but it's as long as your funds are there, it will continue. But if you are getting money from donors, then your customer is not the slum kids. And again, this is going to sound very odd, but they're not the slum kids. Your customer is a donor who feels that you as a service provider are able to do a better job training these slum kids than they can do themselves. So as long as you keep your customer happy who is a donor, then you're fine. And your donor could be the government. But the point is that ultimately you have to be able to provide a service that someone is willing to pay for. In the case of a non-profit, there's a donor who's willing to pay you to provide a service to disseminate his funds in a better way than he can or she can. Conversely, with a for-profit business, then your money doesn't come from a donor, it comes from the fees from the student. But if you understand that model of basically cash in and cash out, and you understand that as long as the person who's bringing in the cash is the person you're providing a great service to, then it's easy for you to understand where your profit comes from in terms of for-profit, not-for-profit, because ultimately you have to sustain a business. If you have no money to pay your people, you don't have a business.
But doesn't that make the situation all the more tricky? Because, how do you bring transparency into the whole system? Now, while your donor as a customer might be very happy, but the slum kid who is eventually the product coming out of the third party, then
absolutely true.
And
So
he may not be happy with the
correct,
whole
which is why, like, as a social enterprise, you have to make sure that you actually have transparency where you're able to show that, okay, look, let's say 50 lakhs coming in, I have taught this many slum kids, this is what I've done, this is the proof that I've done it. Like when you do with the work with the Charity Commission or any non-profit, that ultimately the transparency is there. So you can show value, because as long as you're able to show value, the donor is happy to give the money. Because if you stop showing value and you say, look, I've taken the money, but I can't show you what I've done, trust me, the money will dry up very quickly.
But Ritu, where's the transparency? There's no transparency. I mean, I can tell you that so many people sitting in the audience today are running institutions and they take out profit, right? And they want to create services companies and want to fund them.
Sure.
So, I don't know, what are we talking about over here?
I don't know, one retrospective amendment, let's say something similar to Vodafone, does the damage. Who knows? I mean, I think the regulatory environment itself perhaps has created that confusion.
Yeah, so I think not-for-profit actually makes the transparency
exactly.
all the more difficult.
So it's how it emanates from the environment, the regulatory environment. I think that's far critical. A lot of things are state subject. Suddenly you'll have one law getting changed that you have to have 20-25% kids from below the poverty line, and who knows, something new comes up. And when, like you rightly said, investments about 7-8 years payback, you can't really say how many things will change over
you
time.
can't go out and make judgments every day. Sure.
Well, the one thing I do want to add to this is even 100 years from now, using business vocabulary in education or healthcare will be an ethical issue. It's an ethical issue today, even in US. It's an ethical issue in any Western market. So if you're entrepreneurs in education, you got to get sensitive to how this vocabulary's got to be used. Also, please remember that if you're taking private equity, at some point in time, the exit until you're buying back is going to be a listing. And the day an educational institution lists, there will be this transparency we're talking about, and parents will know how much profit you make. Teachers will know how much profit you make. There is a reason Manipal stopped from listing about 2 years back. Manipal University Group and the whole education was close to $1 billion market capitalization by different private equity. They were about to go public, which would mean the stock would be listed. Everyone, including all of us, would know in an average university, how much do teachers get, how much profit they make. Would parents be as sensitive to paying fees, or next time they are paying fees, they'll say, oh, Mr. Pai takes away 40% profit. We should ask him to reduce fees and not. So the transparency is going to come anyway when you're going to have private equity, whether we like it or not. I think we've got to prepare for it and be sensitive to how education is going to use business language. In case of Manipal, Mr. Pai withdrew at the last minute, did not list. In fact, he went on record to say that educational institutions should not list. Very counterintuitive to people who are raising a lot of private equity, but said so. And I think that is the dilemma of this whole sector, that there is a noble cause, and yet, if you're going to use money, someone who's giving the money has got to get a return, and yet profit is a bad word. So how do you reconcile these almost irreconcilable issues? Will be an ethical dilemma 100 years from now. So the fine art in education is going to be, treading these surfaces and not being able to say, hey, look, I'm only in for this for noble purpose, or I'm only in here for making money.
You want to add? Would you, which actually, before you say something, would you fund a foundation?
No.
No.
Okay, you don't want to
I
say
donate
anything.
to a foundation. Can't
Fund.
No, but the fact is that if the foundation is very, the person sitting on the top, or whatever, the whole ethos of the foundation is very entrepreneurial and they want to take a larger spread and their cause is fantastic, it all looks great on the paper, would you still want to do
so
it?
let me ask a question. And so again, so this is actually a classic core education model. For example, like you have a foundation. Again, Manimal, classic case. You have a foundation which runs it at a non-profit point, but the investment from the private equity person comes in an education services company that allows the investor to put the money in and get the money out. So remember one thing, the investor is looking at like a 5-year, 8-year time frame maximum. They put the money in, they have to give a return to their investors. It's not their personal money. You may want to pass on the business to your kids and grandkids. You may have a 20-year time frame. But if we're talking about investable models, be aware of the model that people will invest in people. I'm talking about investors, private equity investors versus people who will, let's say, donate money just because they feel good about it. Also, just one more thing. When you talk about the term profit, do not believe that a person should start an education business just to take maximum profit for themselves and give a bad service. I believe that the business itself should be very profitable, but ideally you should plow back the profits into the business to keep on providing better and better services to your constituents.
Right.
Don't take a huge amount of money for yourself. So nothing wrong with profit in the business. Profiteering is a different thing. So maybe that's...
Sure.
Just to add to that, one model which all education institutions who are looking at sustenance can consider, which we have done at Jain Group, is this model called as the cross-subsidization model, where you have educational institutions which cater to the different strata of society. You charge them according to the facilities what you offer, be it in lakhs, be it in thousands, depending on the model, the curriculum, the facilities and all you give them. But at the same time, try to create a subsidized model for the rural people or those foundation related activities, where I will give a case for all of us to consider. We have a model called as Jain Vidyaniketan, a school on the outskirts of Bangalore, around 35-40 kilometers, in a place called Kanakpura, which has all the infrastructure required for any international school. But the kid who goes there should be from a rural background, and he pays 1 rupee fees per year. He gets complete facility, be it education, transportation, food, books, uniforms, everything will be at par with any international school. Now what happens, my other schools which are across the country, yeah, you may clap for that, I'll feel good. So what happens here is those schools which are spread across in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, in Pune, in Kanpur, in other places, they charge at par with the city and they plow back that, as you rightly said, to the trust, and then that fund the subsidized model. So that way your interest to run a profitable business is intact. At the same time, the objective of the foundation also is taken care, and the investor is also happy that there is churning of capital going on in a rightful, meaningful manner.